Hi, so today you are going to be using your lab notebook for the very, very first time. And so I hope you have one in front of you. If not, dig it out of your backpack or go grab it off of the shelf by the window. I placed them over there when you gave me them earlier this year. Now, the first lab that we're going to be doing in our lab notebook is called the Solid Density Lab. And your goal, basically, or purpose for this lab is to use lab data or collect lab data accurately enough to be able to determine the identity of an unknown substance. So purpose or goal. Okay. Now, so the issue is there's a little scenario set up that basically ordered a box of different cubes or rectangles or whatever, different sizes and different material, but we couldn't figure out which one is which. So the materials that you're going to have at your disposal are a ruler, a balance, and then 1, 2, 3, 4, 5 different blocks. So there's going to be like 5 different blocks. One is transparent, one is gray, one is opaque, one is black, and one is white. So your job is to collect the appropriate data to calculate the density of of each of those individual blocks. So your job, so in order to be prepared to do the lab, you're going to have to set up your lab notebook, which we'll get into in a second. And one of the things that you're going to have to do when you set up your lab notebook is you are going to have to actually write your own procedure for this. Now, since you're going to be calculating the density at some point or another, you're going to have to collect data that will allow you to calculate density. And just as a refresher, you may recall from earlier this or last week or whatever, density is equal to mass over volume. And so you need to be able to collect the appropriate data to get the mass of every block in question and then the volume of every block in question. So your procedure needs to follow that or be able to tell somebody how to do that. Now, I've always told students that when they write a procedure, their procedure should be complete enough that will allow somebody else, maybe in chemistry, maybe not, to be able to do exactly what they did when they were doing the lab. So we call that reproducibility. So in this case, you're going to have to write it in steps. The steps should be numbered. You're going to have to identify the specific pieces of equipment that you're going to be using. Hint, hint, wink, wink, nudge, nudge, check the materials list. And then when you are taking a measurement and putting it into your lab notebook, you should be using the word record every time you take a measurement. After you've described really pretty completely how you're going to collect the mass and volume data, it is allowable to say things like repeat steps, 1 through 85. So you don't have to write the procedure over and over and over again. And then the other thing that we don't do in our procedures, we don't tell people how you're going to do the math. That is an assumption that a procedure makes, is that the student knows how they're going to do the math, or at the very, very least, will be able to do the math itself. So we'll keep going here. So once you had your procedure approved, you're going to need to create an organized spot for you to collect all of your raw data. And it should be a table or a list. But remember, any measurement that you take, whether it be from a ruler, whether it be from a balance, whether it be from a graduated cylinder, would go in your raw data. So this is your measured data, which is your raw data. And there'll be no calculations here. It'll just be the numbers that you collect. And then let's see. Oh, then you'll have some post-lab calculations, and we'll talk about that in a minute. I give you a big hint right here about what measurements you need to take to collect for the volume. So your raw data table should probably have a length, it should probably have a width, and it should probably have a height in it. Just saying. That's in your raw data table. And then when you do your calculations, we're asking you to show the work that as you solve for the volume of each color. So if I believe there's 5 different blocks that you're going to be asked to calculate the volume for, you need to show the work for all 5 of them. And make sure that you label which block you're calculating for. Like if it were me, I would say like clear block, and I would then put volume, length times width times height, and then I would do the math, show a substitution, and then my answer. And then we're going to want to make sure that we follow sig figs and then make sure our answer has the appropriate unit. So this is an example of what your calculation will look like for the volume. The next thing that you'd have to calculate is the density. And so if you're not sure what the density formula is, you might want to go back and look at Unit 2.8 learning target notes. And then you're going to follow the same format. Opaque block, formula substitution answer, and plug it in. Now, I'm going to come back to this conclusion in a second after we've talked about how to set up our lab notebook. So I'm going to go back up here and I'm going to jump into the setting up the lab notebook part. So here's an online version, I guess, of a digital or of a lab notebook, composition notebook. See, it's got the bound edge on the left-hand side there. And every time that you do a lab in this class, we're always going to start on a clean right side page. So we'll always start a lab on a clean right side page. And that's going to become your title page. And your title page is pretty simple. It's got a couple of things on it that are always the same. You'll have the title of the lab. So in this case, it might be something about mass and volume or something. Don't use this. Be a little bit more specific. Think about independent versus dependent variable. I don't know. The date of the lab. Yeah. So you'd want to do the date that you actually collect your data. So this would be like, I don't know, let's say today is the 11th. So Tuesday is the 12th. So this will probably be something like 10/13/2021. And then your lab partner's name, whoever that may be. Your goal or purpose for this lab, kind of already hinted on over here. You might want to just paraphrase that and or copy it. That'd be perfect. And then the answer to the safety question. So oftentimes, and in the first lab that we did, we learned about the fact that some chemicals could potentially make you blind if you ingest them. So there were some safety concerns that you want to talk about. So this is always going to come right after the goal of the purpose. But in this lab, there's no safety questions for this lab. So there's really nothing to really be super concerned about. So you can actually skip that portion, or you could just write answers to safety question or safety question. You can just put not applicable in this lab. Materials list is exactly what it sounds like. It's a list. So in this case, we've got a ruler, a balance, a transparent block, a gray block, an opaque block, a black block, and a white block. And all you have to do is simply copy that list there. And it should be like bullet pointed, like, and if you want to do it in columns, that's cool. But you're just going to keep track of the materials that you use. Make sure that you're specific about the types of materials that you use. So for example, if we were using a piece of glassware, you wouldn't just say like glass cup, you'd say beaker, or you wouldn't say flask, you would say Erlenmeyer flask. And then if there happen to be any pre-lab questions, which some labs that we do ask you to do some pre-lab work. This one also doesn't really have much. So you could probably just write the heading pre-lab questions and then put NA because it's not necessary for this one. So that covers the goal, the purpose of the goal. That covers the safety question, covers the materials list, and it covers the pre-lab if there is any. Now we get to procedure. And in a lab notebook, it doesn't actually matter how much space the title, the parts of the title page take up. You could have like this whole page all the way full of stuff and call it your title page. Or you could have like this much and call it your title page. Or you could have like this much and call it your title page. It kind of doesn't matter. The thing of it is that has to be on the title page is this, and this, if applicable. Anything above that will go on the next page. And like I said, the title of the lab, the date of the lab, partner's name, that basically takes up 3 lines. You skip a line, you write your goal. That's like 2 lines. Safety question, 2 or 3 lines. Materials list, however you choose to do it. Columns or just one column, doesn't matter. Still on the same page. And pre-lab questions on the title page also should be pretty much it. We're going to jump ahead to the next page. Now, I know how this looks, but the procedure page is always going to be on the left-hand side. On the back of the title page. And there's a very important reason for that, which the reason why we do that is so if this is your book right here and you did a title page on this page right here and you flip it over, you'd have your purpose on the back of it. So like this clearly is not a composition notebook, but if this was my title page, okay, I would open my notebook and this would be my procedure page. Okay. And the reason why we want the procedure to be on the left-hand side or back of the title page is because it makes it a little bit easier to collect your data. So your procedure should be written or pasted here. If you're given a procedure that you cut out and you're going to put it in your notebook, you just simply grab some glue or some tape and you glue it or tape it in there. If you're going to be handwriting a procedure like you're going to be doing for this particular lab, you would start with 1 and you would say, blah, 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 2, blah, 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 3, blah, 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 4, blah, 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 blah. Now, after 1, right, if you're collecting data, you might have the word record. And maybe after 3, you might have the word record. And that's important because that's going to remind you or the person that's repeating your lab that they have to record something. So anytime that you have something that you have to record, here we go, on your raw data page, it would come across here. So it'd say record, and you might record it here. I don't know, we'll say something like 37.3 milliliters. Okay. So anytime that you have something to record, you're going to just pull it over to the raw data page. It's always opposite the procedure page. So this will again be on the right-hand side. And a clean page. And you'll just have your appropriate list for raw data collections or a raw data table. In this particular lab, we're telling you in the lab data sheet that you are going to need 3 measurements for volume. So your table or your list should probably include those things. And when you have to calculate density, we already discussed that you need a mass. So you probably need that as well. So your raw data here should be some type of organizational system that allows you to collect mass and length and width and height data for all of the objects that you have to work with. And that's your raw data page. You should make sure that you have units on the raw data page. You should make sure that you have the right number of digits. Because in this lab, we are specifically giving you measuring devices that we know the exact number of digits for. So when you go to calculate your mass and your volume, when your density and your volumes, we know exactly how many digits that the significant figures are going to be in your answers. So it's really, really important that you're doing that. Now, let's talk for a second. Balances. Record what the readout says. So if it goes to 2 decimal places, you write that down. If it goes to 3 decimal places, you write that down. If it goes to 1 decimal place, you write that down. But for your balance, you just copy down exactly what the readout says. Don't round it, just copy it down and make sure you put grams after it. For a ruler, and specifically the ruler that we're going to use for this lab, I can tell you that the ruler is going to go to, that when you're measuring it, you're going to need to record to 2 decimal places. So every measurement you take with your ruler needs to have something point, like 3 point something something. Has to. And the unit for that should probably be in centimeters, because we're definitely not using the inches side. Okay, so those are the 2 pieces of measuring equipment that you're going to be working with, and that's how you're going to record that information. Also, something that I really want to kind of point out here is that you will never do math in your raw data. And it doesn't matter how simple it is. Like, even if it happens to be subtracting, like 3.0 minus 1.0, and you know it's going to be 2.0, it doesn't matter. You cannot do that math in your head. You have to record exactly what you saw or observed in the lab. So that's your raw data table page. Now we're going to go, and the next page, post lab page or pages, this will be on, I should probably do it on the correct side, on the left side, or the back of the raw data page. You're going to do your post lab things. So if you collect data that allows you to create a graph, you will create a graph. Or you'll paste one in probably. If you collect data that needs to be organized in your data table. Now, this organized data table would be something that sometimes is also referred to as a process data table. This might be where your volume, hint, hint, wink, wink, nudge, nudge goes, or maybe your density, hint, hint, wink, wink, nudge, nudge. Okay. There's also going to be a spot for you to do calculations, or if you have calculations that you can do really quickly, you're going to do them here. And usually it will be in a formula, substitution, answer format. Okay. And if there happen to be post-lab questions, you would address them on the post-lab page or pages. If there is a conclusion that you're asked to write, you would put that on your post-lab page or pages. And especially for your post-lab stuff, you don't have to worry about getting it into one page. If you need to go to a second page or a third page or even a fourth page for your post-lab stuff, that's perfectly acceptable. So no lab has to be like title page, procedure, raw data page, and then post lab page, only 4 pages long. Sometimes it will be, but other times it's going to be more than 4 pages. So don't stress out about that. Okay. So the other thing that I would kind of want to point out about your lab notebook is that make sure that everything that you do has a heading. Like, see, up here we have things like your procedure, or up here there's all of these headings. Write your heading and then the information after it. So for like partner's name, don't just write your partner's name, write partner's name, colon, and then put the person in there. Maybe it was Jethro Smith. I don't know, but just make sure that you have a heading and then put that person's name in there. So going back to your lab, in your post-lab calculations, you will be doing the volume, you'll be calculating the density, and then there's going to be this table, okay? And at some point, you are going to cut this out, and it will go into your pre-lab. Okay. This will probably go, let's see, where do we decide that it would go? It would probably go in the pre-lab question section for this particular lab. So you're going to cut that out and put that in there because you're going to have to refer back to that. So in this particular lab, we'll say you're going to paste in the unknown substance graph. From the handout. So that's what will happen in the pre-lab question there. And that's going to be important because when you're done calculating each density of the block, your job is to use this table here, and you're going to basically be copying this one in. So you're going to be using this table right here to identify which brick or block was which. So for example, if you calculate the density of the transparent block to be something like, I don't know, 0.3, let's say 0.21 grams per centimeter cubed, you're going to be going back and referring to these densities over here. And if that's what you got, and if the closest one is circle, you might write circle here. Okay. And then you would record the company provided density, which would be 0.50 grams per centimeter cubed or something like that. So we're just asking you to go ahead and do that. So it says copy the following process data table into your lab notebook. So we're not looking for you to cut it out. We're actually looking for you to physically copy it in and then fill it out. So let's see. Your class structure for the next day or so is going to be, after you've watched this video, you're going to work on your own pre-lab. You're going to have your teacher check off that your procedure is complete and it makes sense. And then Wednesday, you will be going into lab and you will be collecting data with the blocks and the rulers and the balance. And then Thursday, you will have an opportunity to finish up your calculations from there. Now, there's one other thing that I would like to kind of talk about in terms of this lab itself. When you're measuring a block, right? Something like this, okay? Students often ask, well, what's the length, width, and height? And I usually respond with, it kind of doesn't matter as long as you're aware of what it is that you're measuring. So like in this instance, I would probably say like, this is my length, this is my width, and this is my height. But it could also be the other way around because it's a cube in some way, shape, or form. So just when you're identifying what your length, width, and height are, make sure that you are not measuring the same side twice. Okay. So that's the last bit of information I have for you. If you have any questions, please feel free to reach out or grab your teacher. And good luck setting up your lab notebook for tomorrow. And good luck with your data collection.